Hello and welcome back everyone to the latest episode of An American in Thailand, airing every Friday. This program is broadcast to you from Ratchamakon University of Technology, Peranakan, and it will come to you in two parts. For the first part, I will introduce a certain topic about being an American living here in Thailand. Could be about food, travel, culture, politics, lifestyle, anything we want to talk about. We'll then take a break, and in the second part of the program, we will get into examples and more specifics of whatever the topic is that we are talking about. All right, let's get to the program. Welcome everyone, my name is Gary Gray, and I am an American English teacher working here at Ratchamakon University of Technology, Peranakan. As I tell you in my introduction every week, I've been living here for about 9 years now. It'll be exactly 9 years as of next month. So, in fact, actually, just a few days from now. I moved here on June 1st of 2017, and I do record this program a bit ahead of time, but when this program airs, it will be the 22nd, I think, the 22nd of May of 2026. So I will have been here 9 years in just a few days from now. Okay, so as I tell you every week, having been here so long, I think I have a pretty good feel for Thai culture, Thai places. I do like to travel. I don't travel around quite as much as I used to, just because of finances. So there are parts of Thailand I have not been to. Like the southern parts, I'd like to go down there sometime. I've never been down there, but I've traveled around a lot, so I know quite a lot about Thailand. And so I can kind of give you my take on some of the differences between America and Thailand. And so what we're going to talk about today is more something that's about America. But it's something that's much different here in Thailand, and it's something that I want to explain to you. It's a topic we've discussed before, but we've kind of discussed the differences. So we haven't really focused on one of these systems or the other system, and that is politics. We're going to talk about politics. And don't worry, it's always a little dangerous to talk about politics. I'm not going to say anything about sort of either party or whatever ideas you might have on politics, how you might feel about certain things. What I want to talk about today is just about how the United States picks its president. Okay, because it's very different than here in Thailand. Here in Thailand, it actually confuses me a little bit. Of course, we have a prime minister here in Thailand, not president, but how they pick the prime minister here in Thailand, it actually confused me at first, but it's basically what we would call a parliamentary system, where you're kind of voting for the power, for the party, and then the party that has the most seats, they don't necessarily win. For example, the last election we had, where they were deciding that, or maybe it was 2 elections ago, the party that got the most seats did not actually get their leader as prime minister, because they weren't able to form the coalition, because there are so many different parties that no one party gets the majority. So you have to kind of form groups with other parties. And so a couple of other parties joined together. I think it was 3 different parties joined together so that they could actually get the majority and put in their prime minister that they wanted. So that's how they do it here. Which even confused me a little bit, and I follow politics very closely, which is why I think this is an interesting topic, because we have an election coming up this year in the U.S. As I said, it's 2026 right now. I think I said 2016 earlier. It's 2026. My mind is on 2016. It's something I'm going to mention in here in our discussion today. But it's 2026, so we don't have a presidential election this year. We have election for Congress, but that might affect the president. If the president's party doesn't win Congress, and the president's party currently does control Congress, if the opposing party wins, which it looks like they will control at least part of Congress after this election, they can stop some of the things that the president wants to do. Now, why does this even matter to you? And we're not going to be really talking about the congressional elections too much. I'm going to mention something about that at the end because what we're talking about does affect that in one way. But we're mostly going to talk about the presidential system. And why does this matter to you? Well, right now, as I said, for those of you that might be watching this in the future, because it's going to go up on YouTube, we're recording this in like late May, middle to late May of 2026. So right now we kind of have an oil crisis going on. Well, what was that caused by? It's caused by the war in Iran. What caused the war in Iran? The United States and Israel attacking Iran. And so the president of America can matter for the whole world. It matters for everyone. I have to imagine, I think it's fairly clear, that had the other presidential candidate won in the election in 2024, that war would not have occurred, and so we would not currently have the oil crisis we're going through, which is affecting the entire world. So the presidential elections in America matter, even here in Thailand. So I want to explain to you how it works there. Again, we've discussed this a little bit, but not in detail. We're going to do a little more detail today. And the elections in America can confuse people who are not from America sometimes. I'll give you an example. In 2016, this is where I told you I was going to mention 2016, for example, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump. But Donald Trump became the president. Huh? How does that work? How does that happen? Okay. So we have a system in America called the Electoral College. So let me explain how that works. Basically, every state gets a certain number of points. They're called, it's part of the Electoral College. They are called electors. And they are actual people who will cast a vote for a candidate. Generally, it's based on what the people of their state want. So whoever wins their state, these electors will cast their ballot for that candidate. Occasionally, you get some rogue electors who will vote for someone else. But let's just consider it like points. So you're just trying to get the most points. Whoever gets the most points wins, basically. So each state gets a number of points. The points are mostly based on their population. Mostly. That is a little bit important. We'll talk about that a little later. It's based on your population, but then it's +2 for everyone. So the minimum you can get is 2. I said we'll talk about that a little later. Let's talk about that now so you can understand the point system. And so that does give smaller states a little bit of an advantage. We'll talk about that in the second part of our program. Gives them a little bit of an advantage because let's say they were only going to get 1 electoral college vote. Well, now they're going to get 3 because we add 2 to everyone. That's basically tripling their voting power. Meanwhile, a state like California, I think they have 54. I'm not sure. I didn't even write that down in my notes. I think they have 54. They go from 54 up to, so they would have had 52. So they go from 52 to 54. Whatever. It's not that big of a jump. Not that big of a jump. So that's less of an increase, relatively. So smaller states get more influence. And that is one way that this can get messed up and misaligned, where the person that doesn't get as many votes actually wins. The other issue is that only 2 states divide up their electoral votes, their points. Only 2 states divide up their points. So, for example, if candidate 1 gets 51% of the vote and candidate 2 gets 49% of the vote, candidate 1 gets all the points. All the points. Doesn't matter that it was so close. And that's really what happened in 2016. Donald Trump won a bunch of those close states, and so he got all their points. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida. He won them all very close. Florida since then has gone a lot more towards his party, but in that election it was very close. So he won all those states, very close, gets all the points for them. Hillary Clinton wins states like California and New York by huge margins. And so she's got, those are very big states with lots of people. So she's got all of these extra votes. Well, she still just gets all the points for that state. Okay, well, it's good. They're big states. The number of points is based on the population. So she still gets a lot of points for those states. But relative to the amount of votes she's getting, she's not getting anywhere near the number of points as her votes, because she's still got a lot of votes in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida. She gets none of the points. And some of those states are pretty big too. Michigan's pretty big. Florida's very big. Georgia was also fairly close. In fact, Joe Biden won it in the next election. But she lost that closely as well. That's also a reasonably big state. She gets none of the points. So that's another way that this can happen. Now, I will tell you that usually that does not happen. In the entire history of the U.S. doing these elections, up until 2000, the year 2000, it has only happened once, ever. That was in the late 1800s. Since 2000, it's actually happened twice. It happened in 2000, and it happened in 2016. In 2000, that was Al Gore versus George W. Bush. Al Gore got more votes. George W. Bush won. Now, I will tell you, based on most of the research I've seen, this is probably going to upset people in America that watch this who happen to be Republicans, because they're going to say, well, you just say that because you're a Democrat. But no, based on real research, the best research that's out there, actually had they done a recount in the state of Florida, which was underway, had they completed that, Al Gore probably would have won Florida and then would have won the election. So this really shouldn't have even happened in 2000. Shouldn't have. The count got stopped by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, which was loaded with Republicans who stopped the count and basically handed the election to George W. Bush. So my point about that isn't to be controversial about, who stole did they steal the election? Blah, blah, blah. No, my point about that is that even in 2016, even in 2000, that shouldn't have happened. You shouldn't have gotten that split between the electoral college vote, that's the points that we're talking about, and the popular vote, like just the actual number of votes for each candidate throughout the country. So really, 2016 is the only time that's happened since the late 1800s. So it is fairly rare, and that's why there has not really been a big push to get rid of the system. Even though everyone kind of recognizes that it's not a great system, nobody really wants to get rid of it until recently. Now there kind of is, because we've seen this happen twice since 2000. Again, 2000, it didn't really. But officially, on the record books, it looks like it happened. So it's happened in 2000, it happened in 2016, and so now there is a kind of a push to get rid of the Electoral College. So, in the second half of our program, I will explain kind of why this system came into effect and why we should change it. I mean, it may be obvious why we should change it, because I just told you you get this split. But that split was kind of intended, a little bit. We'll talk about that. They wanted that to be able to happen, even though it's kind of messy. I'll explain why when we come back for the second half. All right, let's take a quick break. All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, so we're talking about the Electoral College system in the U.S., which is how we select our president. In the first half, I've explained to you how it works. Basically, a point system for each state. All right, so why do we do it? There's two main reasons why this system was set up, why the people who set this up wanted it to be set up this way. because it does seem weird, right? Convoluted, not entirely fair. But at the time, they didn't want small states to be ignored. That was one thing. That's why we give the extra 2 points, electoral votes. That's why we give the extra 2 points to every state. And after I tell you why we did this, I'll tell you why that's no good anymore. So that doesn't really... That's become a bad thing. But back then, they thought that was a good thing. We don't want a small state like Rhode Island or Delaware getting outvoted by Virginia. We don't want Virginia, which was a big state at the time. It's still fairly big, but we're talking like almost 200 years ago when this system was set up, or over 200 years ago. I'm not sure exactly the date that they put this system in place, but it's been, I think, a little more than 200 years ago. So back then, Virginia was one of the biggest states. I think it might have been the biggest state in the U.S. So they didn't want Virginia just dictating everything to Delaware. Make it a little more fair. So we add 2 to every state. Okay? The second reason, and you'll see obviously why this is not a good plan for today's world, was this system was developed back when southern states didn't really like this idea. They didn't like the idea. They agreed to do it only if the system was based on the number of people in the state. Yeah, okay, that makes sense, right? The number of people. Yeah, yes, but the number of people is not the number of voters. Back when the system was developed, we still had slavery in America. So people in the South, they wanted the slaves to count. They wanted the black people to count, but the black people couldn't vote. What that meant is if you're counting them, but they're not voting, then the people voting are going to have more power than the average voter in states that don't have slavery. Right? You understand how the math is going to work there? For that reason, they did have to at least compromise a little bit, and they counted black people only as 3/5, which is pretty pretty racist as well, but at least I guess it didn't give Southern slaveholders all the power they were looking for, I guess, by doing that, because you're not counting them as much, I guess. It's really some twisted logic in there to figure out, is that good that you count them as 3/5? Because they don't have the power to vote anyway, so you're not giving the slave owners the full power. Or is it bad because you're saying black people are 3/5 of a person, which I'm going with the latter, and that's usually how we look at it in today's society, that was not a good thing. So that's the second reason why this system is set up this way, because certain people couldn't vote, and because the state still has to support those people, they wanted the numbers based on the population, not just the voters. Okay, so why should we get rid of this system? Well, both of these reasons are outdated. The second reason should be obvious. It's completely racist. And it's just a way for slave owners to wield more power. Plus, blacks can vote now, so everyone who's an adult, because women couldn't vote then either, but I don't think there would have been a big disparity of the numbers of women in different states relative to the number of men. So that one doesn't create like an imbalance of population versus voters, whereas the slaves do. But now black people can now vote. I was almost going to say slaves can vote. Oy. Thank God we don't have slaves anymore. I think that's an obvious statement. So black people can now vote in America. They've been able to vote since after the Civil War, shortly after the Civil War was over, which freed them, and then shortly after that they were allowed to vote. And women have been able to vote since the early 1900s. So everyone who's an adult now and a citizen, you do still have to be a citizen, but everyone who's an adult and a citizen can vote in the U.S., with just a few exceptions, like criminals in a lot of states can't vote. In some states, even they can still vote because they're still citizens, so the state decides, yeah, we'll let them still vote. But in some states, they're not allowed to. But just about everyone who is an adult citizen of the U.S. can vote. So we don't need that. So that first reason is gone. The first reason is because there's a difference between there's a big difference between population and voters. Now there isn't. That reason is gone. Now, as far as the size, giving the smaller states more power, I mean, it made sense at the time. The smallest state was, or I should say the largest state was 7 times larger than the biggest state. I believe it was Virginia was the largest. I think the smallest was Delaware, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Might have been Rhode Island. Rhode Island's quite small, but I think it was Delaware. And I believe, and Virginia was 7 times bigger than Delaware. Well, now that difference is 30 times. And so the effect of how much more power that's giving the small state is a lot larger. Like I said, you're tripling some small states' power, because there are a few states that do get, like, 3 electoral votes. So you're giving small states a lot more power. So it's much more disproportionate now. So it's really a bad idea. And what makes it even worse is that it also favors one party over the other. How? Why is that? Well, it just so happens... It's not really a good explanation for this. Well, in some ways, I guess there sort of is. And this doesn't necessarily have to always be true, but it happens to be true right now. I mean, it depends on how people vote. Different types of people tend to vote different ways, and demographics change, and different groups of people may change how they vote. For example, people in farming communities in rural America used to vote for Democrats like 50 years ago. Now they vote overwhelmingly for Republicans, and so things can shift. But as it stands right now, it just so happens that more of the large states are Democratic and more of the small states are Republican. So this system where small states have more power means Republicans automatically get an advantage. I can prove it to you. Because I'm sure if I have any American friends watching this who are like, oh, that's not true, because they get offended because I'm saying, oh, this is rigged for the Republicans. It's not really rigged. Like I said, these things can change. But as of right now, that's just the way it works. That's just the way it is. So I'll prove it to you. If you look at the largest 20 states and the smallest 20 states, we'll leave out the middle 10 because that's kind of about average. There are 50 states in America. If you look at the largest 20 states in America, 8 of them are Democratic, 5 are Republican, and 7 are what we call swing states. They kind of go back and forth. So that is 8-5 Democratic. Now, if you look at the 20 smallest states, 6 are Democratic, 12 are Republican, and 2 are swing states. That's 2-1 advantage for the Republicans with the smaller states. And again, the smaller states have more power. 2-1. There's a huge difference there. And then, of course, again, the Democrats have more of the big states as well. That separation isn't quite as big there. That's 8-5. Not quite 2-1, but almost 8-4 would be 2-1. It's 8-5. So that's another reason why this is a bad way to do things. So, in the end, I would conclude that the U.S. presidential election system is bad. It's not a good way to do things. We kind of get away with it because, like I said, it rarely goes wrong. But it's still a bad system. For one thing, it stems from racially motivated politics. For another thing, it favors one party over the other. It really should be abolished. The problem is, the way to abolish it is very difficult. You have to do like a constitutional amendment because all of this is in our Constitution. That's got to be hard to do. Because then each state you need to get like 2/3 of the states or 3/4 of the states. I forget what the rule is. It's more than the majority, though, to vote in favor of the constitutional amendment. Well, like I said, all the small states, they get extra power. You think they're going to vote to give up their power? No. So a lot of states are going to vote against it. Really hard to change it. So is there a way around it? Not really an easy one. Sort of a little bit of a patch to help would be to have all of the U.S. territories, make them states, allow them to vote. How does that even help? How does that help? Okay, it's going to add, probably, this could be arranged in many, many different ways, but probably that's going to add you in 2 states. Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, which are down in the Caribbean, which are U.S. territories, would be 1 state. And the Pacific Islands that are territories of the U.S., we have like American Samoa, Guam, there's a couple of others. Those could be a state. Now, that would be a very small state in terms of population. Puerto Rico is a little bit bigger. It wouldn't even be the smallest U.S. state, even though the island's pretty small. It's got a large population there. But the Pacific one would be pretty small. So that gives Democrats 2 more small states. Doesn't fix the problem entirely. It's still going to be 12-8. And there's no guarantee that those 2 new states will always vote for the Democrat. Guam, for example, in the Pacific side, tends to lean Republican a lot of times because a lot of the military leans that way, and there's a lot of military on Guam. Not as much as some other places might that are heavy military, but they do lean that way. They tend to lean that way. So that's the other problem. There's no guarantee that these are actual Democratic states that you're adding. But that would help balance that out as far as the partisan aspect of this. It doesn't fix the problem. Like I said, it's still 12-8. The big states, it doesn't solve that problem, where 8 of them are Dem, 5 are Republican, Democratic, 5 are Republican. But it would help. Like I said, not going to fix the problem. 2016, you're going to end up with the same result. Donald Trump won so many of those states closely that the actual points, the electoral vote count, was not close. Adding in a couple of small states with 3 or 4 electoral votes is not going to change anything. However, 2000, if you want to argue that that count was correct, which, like I told you, I argue that it's not, so this didn't really happen in 2000. But if you accept the official numbers as correct, this did happen in 2000, and this patch would have solved that problem. It is just a patch. It doesn't really, they just need to go over to a popular vote and get rid of the Electoral College entirely. But like I said, that's probably not ever going to happen. So this is a patch to kind of lessen the problem. I don't think they're going to do that anytime soon either, because none of the Republicans in Congress would vote for it because it's going to reduce their power. In theory, like I said, there's no guarantee that these 2 new states would actually even vote Republican, or would vote Democratic. But I think the Republicans would all still vote against it. I do think, though, that there is one extra benefit to that solution, even though it's not really a solution. It's kind of a patch. And that is that, the United States, we call ourselves like the most democratic country in the world, whatever. They like to be proud of their democracy in America. Well, your territories, they should be allowed to vote for president, too. If you're going to call yourself a democracy, you don't have citizens that can't vote. And people that live in our territories are actually considered U.S. citizens, and they cannot vote in the presidential election. They are allowed to vote in the primaries, which is a little weird, but they can't vote in the presidential election people from Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Guam. I want to say the Marshall Islands, but one of them is no longer a U.S. territory. I don't know if it's the Marshall Islands or the other one. I'm forgetting. Anyway, there's a couple other territories there as well. They can't vote. So, this is just a patch. It would help. It wouldn't fix it. But anyway, that's how the U.S. presidential election system works, why it's flawed, why it needs to change. It should just be a simple national popular vote. It isn't, and it probably isn't going to change either. As I said, it's really hard to change it, but it really should change, and that's why. But I hope now you understand how our system works. So in 2028, when we have our next presidential election coming along, as I said, you can see from what's going on in the world right now that the president of the U.S. matters. So you may want to pay attention in 2028 to the U.S. election. And because it takes a while to count the ballots and everything, the results usually come in fairly late at night in America, which is actually late morning here. So it's a pretty good time. Everyone's awake. You can follow it online, watch it on TV. I mean, it would happen on a Wednesday morning here, so you're probably working. But, you know, your break time, you can follow it online and see what's going on with the vote counts, see who's winning what states, see how that's going. So now you understand how it works. And you'll understand when you see, oh, well, this person won that state, so they get this many points, this many electoral votes. You'll understand why. Well, why does that person get all the electoral votes from that state when they just barely won the state? Because that's how we do it. They just do. So now you'll understand that, and you can follow that election in a couple of years when we have that one. All right, so that's how we do it. That's how we do the presidential elections in America. It's not the best way, not a good way. We usually get away with it. We escape because we don't have that problem where the person that got the most votes loses. Does not happen very often. It's happened only 2 or 3 times ever. So thankfully, we don't have to deal with it very often, but it has happened recently. And that's why it's a big topic of conversation in the U.S. these days. All right, so thank you for joining us for today's episode of An American in Thailand. Any young people out there who are headed off to university soon, please consider our wonderful university here, Ratchamakan University of Technology, Peranakan. All right, please stay with us and tune back in next week for another interesting episode. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.